guys, it's Sarah, and today we're going to continue talking about series. I kind of got onto this topic a little bit. It's been something that has definitely been on the forefront of my mind this year, which was unexpected. I wasn't starting out the year thinking about concentrating on series or trying to finish series or catch up on series or start new series. I didn't even have series on my brain at all when the year started. But now it's definitely there and definitely something I'm thinking about focusing on a little bit more this year, which is why I didn't really want to make a ton of commitments this year or think about doing any big projects, because I wanted something like this or anything else that kind of came to my mind to just be allowed to be here and be allowed to be something that I can concentrate on without thinking about other things I should be doing, because I've already said those things out loud. So I want to talk a little bit more about series today. Now, today I want to talk about some series that I'm in the middle of that I would need to do some work reading to either catch up or finish. So it's not something that I can easily do with just one book, or, there's only one book published, so I could just go ahead and read that and wait for the next one to come out. It's something that I've already started. I have these books in my possession on my shelves, and I just haven't continued with them yet. But I want to, obviously, because they're still on my shelves. And it's just going to take a little bit more reading for me to get to that point to where I either finish it or catch up or whatever. And I wanted to talk about those. And I'm going to talk about specific series. There are definitely not as many as unread series that I have on my shelves that I talked about before. If you haven't seen that video, I'll link it down below. I don't talk about specific series there because there's over 100, but I kind of go through that whole discussion and how I realized that and kind of what a wake-up call that was for me, especially with my book buying habits. And it's something that it's going to take a little bit of a shift in my brain to try to make a little bit of change on how I'm approaching unread series on my shelves. And I just want to talk about some that I'm in the middle of completely. And some of them I'm smack dab in the middle of. Some of them I've only read the first book and I would need to read the rest of the series, but it's kind of like a longer series. And so I wanted to talk about those a little bit today. Okay, the first one is actually an overarching world, if you will. And this is something that has been a little bit on my mind lately, and something I'm getting a little bit of an itch to get back to, because I've seen a few people talk about this series, whether they are wanting to start reading the series or whether they want to get back to it. Some people are DNFing it and not going to read anymore in this world, and it's multiple series. But that is the Shadowhunters world, if you will, by Cassandra Clare. The main big series that really started this all is The Mortal Instruments. And then there's a whole bunch of other series that go off into different timelines, but still set within the same world. But, there's different characters and different timelines happening. Some of them overlap, and it's a whole thing, right? I have only read the first 3 books in the Shadowhunters series and The Mortal Instruments, the first 3, and that's it. However, I have that entire series. I have the Clockwork books. What are those called? The Infernal Devices. I have read the first one in that series as well, but it's definitely something I would need to reread because I don't really remember much of it. So I would need to reread that. And I also have started with The Dark Artifices, and I have the novella bind-ups, 2 of those. I'm collecting books in that series and in this overall world. I am not buying any more until I am reading and catching up and knowing that I want to continue with this world before I buy any more. But I definitely have them, and it has just been something I've been thinking about. Now, are these the best books ever? Are they going to be one of my all-time favorite series? Probably not, but they're fun. They're young adult urban fantasies, and especially The Mortal Instruments, has been credited to getting a lot of younger readers into reading. And so I definitely think it's something I want to kind of experience and go through all that, especially so I can recommend it if I think that it's going to be appropriate for someone looking for a book. So it's definitely something I want to get back to. I also have the Daughter of Smoke and Bone trilogy by Laini Taylor, where I did read the first book and I have the other 2, and I just haven't gone back to it. I do remember loving the first book, and I remember enough of the first book that I wouldn't have to reread it. I would probably just need to refresh real quick, but I remember how it ended. I remember being shocked, and I remember the writing being beautiful, because I have read other books by Laini Taylor and her writing is gorgeous. I think the writing in this one wasn't quite as flowery, if you will, as, say, Strange the Dreamer, which I absolutely loved. But I do remember her writing being very good, and it's definitely a trilogy I would like to get back to and to finish up. And again, this is another young adult urban fantasy following like angels and stuff. Okay, let's talk about Leigh Bardugo. Now, this one I actually haven't, it's kind of weird because it's a little bit of a Cassandra Clare thing where it's like an overarching world. So I did read the Shadow and Bone trilogy. So I read those 3 and that's a completed series. But then there is Six of Crows and Crooked Kingdom, which is set in the same world, but different timeline. But in the show, Shadow and Bone on Netflix, that is the adaptation of this, there are characters from Six of Crows that are in that show. So there's definitely going to be some overlapping of some things, and I'm sure there's going to be things mentioned in Six of Crows that happened in Shadow and Bone. And I think there's going to be a little bit of an aftermath type thing. So I feel like it kind of just flows into it, even though I haven't read either one of those 2 books. I still feel like I kind of started that series, and it's a little bit of a continuation type thing. So I definitely want to read those 2, and they're both sitting downstairs on my shelves. And I want to read those before I watch the TV show adaptation, because I want to get a feel for the characters in the books that are going to be in the TV show as well, because it kind of blends them a little bit. Outlander by Diana Gabaldon. Oh man, okay. These books are big. They are so big, but I love them. I have read the first 5. And there are now 9 out, I believe. The 9th book came out recently. And from what I remember, I believe there's going to be 10 books total in the series. I think she's already announced that book number 10 will be the last one. But it's going to be a while before that one's released. But I have read 5 of them. So technically, I'm kind of halfway through the series. And I do love the books. I love the TV show as well, but they're a little bit different. It started out pretty strongly following the books, and then just some things are happening with certain characters that are definitely different from the books and the TV show. So I think it's kind of going a little bit, there's some storylines that are going on its own, which I think is interesting. But what I had been doing was I had been reading the book that coincides with the next season of the TV show, like right before the TV show started. And I know that I didn't read the last one that I need to read before the TV show started. So like I would need to read that first and then watch the show if I want to keep going that way. At this point, I could probably not worry about it just because there is a little bit difference, like the differences are starting to happen. But I do really love this book series, and it's definitely something I want to see through to the finish, and they are fantastic on audiobook. The narrator for these audiobooks is wonderful. I love listening to her voice, and so that's really how I've been consuming them. I don't even own physical copies of them, but they're really great. Even though they're long, they're worth the time. Okay, we're going to get into a couple series that are big, long series. So the first one is the Dresden Files by Jim Butcher. This is an adult urban fantasy story about a man who is a wizard, and he is living in current society, Chicago. Works very closely with a Chicago police detective, and they work on supernatural cases. However, the everyday American society does not know that these beings exist, and they're trying to keep it that way. So all of their work is very much on the down low, and they're just trying to prevent society from knowing that these things are here and that they're dangerous and all that stuff. And I have read, 11 of them. And there's still some more to go. I want to say there's 15 or 16 that are currently released. I don't know if this is a finished series. That's something I would have to do a little bit more research onto it. I haven't looked into it very much recently as far as where he is in the series and how far it's going to go, but it's definitely something I want to get back to. I have really, really enjoyed them. They're also really good on audio. I don't normally do well with fantasy books on audio, but this one I can definitely do. I think the last couple that I read, I listened to, and the narrator was great. So these are definitely like a little bit of an exception to that rule, but they're so much fun. I really like Harry Dresden as a character, and I always just have a really good time reading these books. So it's another series I definitely want to see to the end, and I just need to get back to it. It's been a very long time since I have. Next one is another really, really big, long insanely long series, and that is the Arjuna Vampire series by Lindsay Sands. This is something I started, oh gosh, so long ago. My sister told me about them, and she said they were just a lot of fun, a very adult vampire series, and it is a series that follows a certain vampire family, and you learn about how vampires came to be, which is really, really interesting. I really like the way she took that. And you find out that every vampire has a life mate, and it's like a predestined thing. So there's one person on the planet that this vampire will be with and can be happy with and can truly be themselves for very specific reasons. And there's one person, and it's predestined. It's picked for you, basically. And so you see in each book, you see each member of this family finding out who their life mate is. And they don't know if it's going to be another vampire. They don't know if it's going to be a human that they need to try to convince now to get turned so that they can live their lives together. You don't know if you're going to be following a human that finds out about this and that they meet their vampire. Like, it's a whole thing. And so each one is pretty different, which I really like. There's also continuous stories happening throughout that are pretty thrilling, and, like dangers happening and things like that. So it's not just love stories. There's also a bunch of action and mysteries and things woven in. So I really, really love these books. They're so much fun every time I read them. Again, very adult. They get pretty steamy, especially with the whole life mate thing. There are some graphic scenes, so be wary of that. But if that's something that you enjoy, this one is a high recommend for me. It's just a lot of fun. I have read 21 of these books, and by the end of this year, there's going to be 35 published. The woman writes like 2 a year. I'm not kidding. They just keep coming out, and it's just a lot of fun. It's not wonderfully written. It's not overly complex, but it's a lot of fun, and I always enjoy them when I read them. So it's definitely something I want to see through to the end as well. And but there's by the end of this year, I think number 35 comes out in September. So I got to get back to that one too. Okay, Falling Kingdoms by Morgan Rhodes. I read the first one, I believe, in 2021. And I really, really enjoyed it. I really did. I was really surprised how much I enjoyed that book because it's a young adult fantasy. And I went into it with definitely lower expectations. And I ended up absolutely loving it. And I cared about the characters. I cared about what was happening. And I read it really quickly. And I definitely want to read the rest of the series. I have all 6 on my shelves. So it's definitely something I want to get back to. Don't have any immediate plans yet, but I want to do it sooner rather than later because I don't want to start forgetting what happened in the first one. But yeah, 6-book series, and it's complete. So the next one is the Land of Stories series, which is written by Chris Colfer. This is a middle grade series, and it is about a set of twins that learn that they can travel into a book called The Land of Stories, and that is where fairy tales live. And they end up transporting into this book and seeing the lands that they have been reading about since they were kids, meeting princesses. We're talking Cinderella, Rapunzel, Red Riding Hood is in there, the fairy godmother is there, like all sorts of different people. Maleficent is in one of them. And it's them realizing that this is the thing, and then realizing that there's so much more to these worlds than they were ever told through these stories. And they find themselves really thrown into the middle of it. And you see them almost kind of trying to survive sometimes in this world, and it's a lot of fun. My daughter has read all 6 of these books. There's 6 of them, and absolutely love them. I read the first 2, so book 3 is going to be on deck next, and I think I'm going to read that soon because I definitely want to get back to it and finish that series. All right, let's talk about Brandon Sanderson. So I have 2 different series of his that I have started and really want to get back to. The first one is the Mistborn series. Now, this one's interesting because there's 3, when you say the Mistborn trilogy, you kind of think of the first 3, right? But there's also a Mistborn second era that kind of bounces off of that. It's in a different timeline, but it's in the same world. And I think total number of books that are now out in that, or I think the last one might be coming out, the final one. And I think there's 7 books total, including the first 3. So I think there's 4 books after that as well that follow different characters, but it's in the same world. But I think there's a huge time jump. But that kind of counts as the Mistborn books too, even though it's a second era, if you will. So it's a little bit interesting that way. I only have the first 3 in the trilogy, and I loved the first one, like with a fiery passion. I loved that book so much, to the point that I would probably reread it when I decide to pick up the series again, because I would not mind going back through and like using some book darts in that one and marking some things up. I wouldn't mind doing that in that book. So that's one that, even though I don't necessarily need to reread it, I wouldn't mind doing that. And it is an adult high fantasy, and it is so incredibly well written that it was one of the first books I read when I was really starting to get into fantasy, and it was not over my head. I was easily able to understand it. I got the world, I got the emotions, I got the magic system, and just the way that he wrote the tiniest little details that caused everything to just click in my head was so amazing to me, because I was really intimidated by it. But I recommend it now. If people are even just starting out on fantasy, I will say try this book, because it's just so wonderfully done and really impressive that it can be such a high, complex fantasy book that's completely made up, but it made so much sense to me. And I was reading it like it was no big deal. Like, I get it. Definitely want to continue with that and continue reading that. And then the other one is a young adult, a little bit more on the science fiction type of genre, and that is the Reckoners trilogy, which the first one is called Steelheart, which I read and really enjoyed. And then there's 2 more books in that series sitting on my shelves downstairs that I do need to read for that one. And I really enjoyed this one. It definitely wasn't as good as Mistborn, I will say, but definitely worth the read for me, and enough that I was definitely interested in finishing off the series. And I even gave the first one to my daughter. She was interested in it too, so I gave it to her. And this one is a little bit of a superhero, almost a dystopian type of sci-fi. So the superheroes have taken charge, and this is set in Chicago, but it's like a futuristic type of Chicago. There's a lot of technology, a lot of machinery, a lot of things happening, and these superheroes have come basically to save everybody, and they did, and now they're in charge and they're running the show. However, one of our main characters is noticing that maybe they're not so super after all. They could be like superhuman. However, they're not doing the best things, and it's starting to come to light now. So he really joins a cause that is trying to not overthrow them, but to cause this to come to light and see and let people see exactly what's going on and how corrupt these people are. So yeah, I really enjoyed the first one, and I'd like to finish it up. Okay, let's talk about the Nevernight series by Jay Kristoff. I absolutely loved the first book, Nevernight, and I want to finish the trilogy. And I had pulled the second book to read back in October, I think. Bobby had picked the second one for me to read in that series, and then I was never able to get to it. Just a lot of things started coming up, and I ended up putting a few back, and that was one of them. But I definitely want to finish off this trilogy and see where it's going to go. This is another one that I don't need to reread the first book. I do need a refresher, definitely. But when I read it, I absolutely, absolutely loved it. I mean, it took me a little bit to kind of get the writing style, because there's a lot of footnotes. Some of them are important, some of them are not. Some of them are really funny. And it just took me a minute to kind of get used to that. But I ended up loving it, and this book was really one that got me to fall in love with Jay Kristoff's writing and his humor and all that kind of stuff and his darkness. So that had made me a fan of his books, definitely. So I definitely want to get back to that and finish it. Next one I have is the Percy Jackson series. Now, this one is one that I'm stealing from my daughter, Kaylin. She has read all of them and absolutely loved them, and has been bugging me to continue with them. Now, I think I read the first one and listened to the second one. I think audiobooks are fine for this one for me too. This is a middle grade series, and it just hasn't been high on my priority list. I definitely want to continue with it and kind of get the full story of Percy. I do like the characters a lot in there. There's really good humor that I really enjoy. And my daughter loved them so much. Like, I would say Percy Jackson for her is what Harry Potter is to me. So it's like her version of Harry Potter. The way that I love Harry Potter so much, she loves Percy Jackson. So I definitely want to keep going and working on that series. It's just not super high priority for me, but I'll get there eventually. I've read the first two. The next one is An Ember in the Ashes series by Saba Tahir. Oh man, this one has been really screaming at me from my bookshelves. Every time I look at my shelf, those just kind of, they like shine at me a little bit. And it might be because I just bought the last book recently, but that's definitely a book series I want to finish out because I absolutely loved An Ember in the Ashes. It's another one that I'm not going to have to reread the first one, but maybe a refresh. But I remember reading the first one and just being completely, surprisingly obsessed with it. And I just absolutely loved it. And I want to finish. And there's 4 books in the series, so I need to read 3 more. And they're sitting on my shelves downstairs and really just looking at me. And I'm like, I really want to get back to that. And I think that every single time I look at them. So I need to make that one a priority for sure. And this one is a young adult fantasy series that follows a girl whose brother is arrested for treason, and she is trying to get him free because he is not a traitor. And she ends up teaming up with 2 very unlikely allies, and she has to kind of go undercover in order to even meet these people, and she's in very dangerous situations, and it just goes from there. And I don't know what happens in the second book, so I need to figure that out because I don't know what's going forward. I've heard some magic starts coming in, which I'm really excited about. I don't know how far along into the series that's going to start happening, but that will be interesting definitely because in the first book there wasn't. So yeah, but I remember just absolutely loving the first book. So I definitely want to finish that quartet. Okay, let's talk about Jennifer L. Armentrout. She is a pretty prolific writer. She writes a lot. However, the only book I've read from her is the first book in the Lux series, which is a young adult sci-fi alien series. And I really liked the first one. I was really surprised. I didn't think I was going to like it as much as I did, but I was there for it. Now, this is something that has a lot of like teen angst. So I have to kind of be in the mood for that, definitely. But when I am, like, that's probably going to be what I end up picking up. But I've only read the first one, and there are 5 books total in this series, and I have all 5 of them downstairs. So next time I'm kind of in the mood for something like that, I'll definitely pick up book number 2. And yeah, it was just a ton of fun and very angsty, very heavy on the sexual tension for sure, but I enjoyed it. Okay, another sci-fi is the Renegades series by Marissa Meyer, and this is a trilogy, and it's finished, and I have books 2 and 3 sitting downstairs. I really, really enjoyed the first one. This is a little bit similar to the Brandon Sanderson Steelheart one, where there are superheroes, if you will, like the good guys that are in power, and then there are villains who are also very prominent, and they have their own group, and there's a definite battle between the two. And we are following a girl who was born into the villains, and she has grown up always believing that the heroes were the bad guys, like they were the villains, even though she has that label and her family has that label on them. And so you see her end up going undercover and working inside the government building with heroes and with people who work for them. And you see her start to realize some things that she never knew growing up. And so she starts questioning everything she's ever known, basically. And I really, really liked the first book. So I'm definitely excited to finish this trilogy and read the other 2. And yeah, it was a good time when I read it. So I definitely want to finish that one. Hey, Game of Thrones. Definitely not high on my priority list, but I did read the first book, and I have all of the books that have been published. No, the last one is still not out. Will it ever come out? People are starting to doubt whether it ever will come out, if he's ever going to finish that series. But I loved the first book, and it definitely felt like the first season of the series, which I've watched the entire show. Kind of want to watch it again, not going to lie. I loved that show so much. And I do know that I think after book 2, things start to go differently than how they went in the show. So I'm not expecting the entire book series to be just like the show. I'm expecting him to be different. But the first book was definitely the first season, like hands down. And I really liked it. I liked his writing. I was a little scared going in, even though I had watched the show and I knew the story. I still was a little bit hesitant, but I really, really enjoyed it. And I definitely eventually would like to read the whole thing, but it's definitely not high on my priority list. Okay, the next one is the DC Icon series, and this is a 4-book series that follow superheroes that we know, like Batman, Wonder Woman, Superman, and Catwoman. And they are written by different YA authors. And it's kind of it's them as teenagers, basically. I have read the first two. I read Wonder Woman, which is by Leigh Bardugo, and I read Batman, which is by Marie Lu. So I read those two. I have two more to go. I do have Catwoman by Sarah J. Maas, who's one of my favorites. And I have Superman by Matt De La Peña, who I've never read anything by him before, but I do have those two to read. So that's not too bad. And when I read the first two, they were really quick. They do not overlap in any way, shape, or form. So they are their own stories. So I could read either one next, so like I don't have to go in order. But I do have them all, and I enjoyed the first two that I read. So I would like to finish the other two as well. Oh, let's talk about The Faithful and the Fallen, you guys. I know that some of you are probably screaming at me right now. The Faithful and the Fallen by John Gwynne. When I tell you I was obsessed with Malice when I read it, like that's an understatement. I was so invested in that story. I was so I remember I was working out on my Peloton because I had just recently gotten the Peloton, and I didn't want to stop reading. I opened my book on my Peloton because I knew I needed to get a workout in, but I didn't want to stop reading my book, and I had it out and I was just pedaling and I was reading, and I started screaming at my book because a character was being stupid. And I was like, are you serious right now? And it was just this whole thing. I cared about these characters so much, and I don't know why I have not picked up book 2 yet. I have the rest of the series. I bought book 2 immediately after finishing book 1, and then I was gifted books 3 and 4. And I haven't picked up book 2 yet. And I'm shocked at myself that I haven't done that, because I always keep thinking in my head, I want to pick that up. I want to pick that up. I want to stop talking and doing. You know what I mean? So I'm really surprised that I haven't done that. So this is an adult fantasy book series, completely epic. From what I'm understanding, the entire 4-book series is like one big storyline, and so like the next book picks up right where the last one left off. So like you could almost read them all through and get one big huge story out of it. There's not going to be any time jumps or any big things happening here. So, oh man, yeah, I want to get back to that for sure, because I only read Malice, and it shot John Gwynne up in my mind so much as a favorite author. I've only read one book, and he has quite a few out. So like, oh man, I have some work to do on that one, but like, that's how much I loved Malice. Like, it's one of my favorite fantasy books ever. And it's, yeah, I don't know what my problem is. I don't know. There's no excuses here. No. Okay, the next one I want to talk about is kind of interesting. It's Firefly. So there is a book series that has been coming out, and they're still coming out right now, I think, that are based on the television show Firefly, which, oh my gosh, if you're a science fiction fan or if you're a Nathan Fillion fan, you have got to watch that show. There's one season. I cannot believe that show was ever canceled. That is like a disgrace to humanity. But I absolutely love that show. There's also a movie. And so when these books were coming out, I was like, ooh, I think I'm interested. And I got the first 2. I read the first one and I really liked it. It was so much fun. It felt like the show, very much so. The characters were on brand. I could easily picture like an episode of the show happening in this book while I was reading it. Like, it was very clear in my head. So that was nice. And it just kind of felt good to be with those characters again. And, you know, just to have that humor and their antics and what they got up to and everything. It's basically Space Cowboys, you guys. I'm not kidding. It just was so much fun. And I do have the second book on my shelves downstairs. I don't have any more after that. I think I need to read the second book to see if it's something I want to like continue with and finish the whole thing. But they are just so much fun. They really, truly are. And I think it would need to be something that I need to decide if I want to read and keep on my shelves or if I just want to like read them from the library. I don't know. We'll see. I need to get a little bit more into it to make that decision, but I definitely want to get back into it for sure. And these are written by different authors, so it's not the same author for every single book. But yeah, It's a lot of fun. Okay, North and South by John Jakes. This was one of my favorite things to watch growing up. I watched this miniseries growing up. It has Patrick Swayze in it. It has Kyle Chandler in it. Kirstie Alley is in it, and just a lot of really, really great people are in this series. And I loved the story growing up, and I bought the trilogy that the miniseries is based off of. I did read the first book and I gave it 5 stars. I loved it. So I have the other 2 to read. However, they are this big. They are very, very big books. And it did take me a little while to read North and South, but I definitely want to read the other 2 and just kind of refresh myself with that story. But yeah, a lot of fun. Civil War. It's so much fun. Ooh, yay. It's a lot. But you follow 2 best friends who meet at a military academy, and then they are on opposite sides of the war when the war starts, because Ori is from the South and George is from the North. And so you see them struggle with maintaining their friendship, but having very different values and very different views on life and very different lifestyles and very different political opinions. And you see them still trying to maintain their friendship through all that. Okay, another middle grade, Keeper of the Lost Cities by Shannon Messenger. You guys, I read this book last year as well, the first one, and loved it. I mean, I was obsessed with it. I can't believe I didn't pick up the second book. Like, I'm shocked that I didn't do that right away. I do plan to do that very soon, because this is definitely a series I want to read all of them. I have a lot of them on my shelves. I'm looking right now. I think I have up to number 7. And I think are there 9 published now, or maybe 9, the 9th one is coming out soon, something like that. But I have a lot of them and I want to read all of them, because it follows a young girl who finds out that she is an elf. She did not know any of this existed, and then she finds out. And so you see her trying to acclimate to this whole new world, all these new people, a brand new school, it's a lot for her. And she's finding out a lot of things about her actual family that she never knew about. It is clever. It is really, really smart in the explanation of how she never knew any of this stuff. I thought it was really, really well done that way. And I really, really cared about Sophie and what was happening to her and some of the side characters. And so I really want to get back to that. And I'm going to be doing that very soon. Okay. The Beautiful Bastard series by Christina Lauren. We're going to go much more adult here. And, okay, this series is fun. It's just fun. It's, I don't want to say it's erotica, because it's not, but there's very, very steamy scenes. They are romances. They are very adult, and they're just a lot of fun. Like, it's just really something that I turn to when I just want something fun and quick and steamy. And that's what they are. That's exactly what they are. They don't take themselves too seriously, and it's just a good time. I have read, I've read the first 2. There's 5 total. So I have 3 more books sitting on the shelf in my bedroom, ready to read. So, and there's some novellas in there as well. I don't purchase the novellas. I just read those on my Kindle from my library. They're fun. They're not necessary really, but they're fun too. So yeah, but I'll eventually get all those read. Okay, Karen Slaughter. All right. Karen Slaughter, one of my favorite authors, auto-buy author for me. And she has written 2 different series that actually end up overlapping in one book, and then kind of goes from there. So you start off with the Grant County series, which is 6 books. That is what I'm in the middle of. I have read the first 2. So I do have 4 more books in that series to read. And in one of those books, we meet a new character named Will Trent. He ends up working with the main character, Sarah, in the Grant County series. And then it kind of also blossoms from there and goes into the Will Trent series. And Sarah is in that one as well. So it kind of morphs a little bit. So it's not like one big series. It's 2 separate series, but they kind of overlap and they complement each other very well. And I definitely have all of the Grant County series. I'm I only have a couple of books in the Will Trent series and they're later books, so it's something that I would need to go back and try to find copies of those for my shelves, definitely. Something that I want to think about doing, but I'm going to wait until I finish the Grant County series first, obviously, and then I'll start working on the Will Trent books. But I have gotten a couple of the later ones here and there on discount, so I just kind of grabbed them. But I definitely want to get back to that one. It's Karen Slaughter, it's mystery, it's detective, it's hard topics, it's gruesome, it's fantastic. So I really like her writing. Her writing is just top notch for me and always just gives me a thrill every time I read them. So that's definitely something I want to get back to for sure. Okay, and the last one is the Deborah Harkness series, The Discovery of Witches. I don't know what the name of this series is, but it's A Discovery of Witches is the first book. And there's 3 books in this trilogy. I did read A Discovery of Witches. However, I think I need to reread that one because I listened to it on audio and I really, really don't remember what happened in that book. I know that our main character is a witch. I know that she teams up with a vampire and they're not supposed to be friendly at all. They're like considered enemies, but they work together to solve some sort of mystery that I do not remember. And I think they end up falling in love from what I'm remembering. So, yeah, that's all I remember. And it's a big book. So it's something that if I want to go back to that series, which I do, I have all 3 of them. I need to reread the first one and I think I need to read it physically so that I can pay a little bit more attention and make sure that I have everything down before I move on. And this one has also been adapted. I've heard the TV show is pretty good. So not something I've seen, but I don't want to do that until I actually get to that point. But yeah, it's definitely something that I would like to, reread the first one and then move on. I don't know when that will happen. It's not something calling to me right now, but eventually I'll get there. Okay, guys, that is going to be it for me today. So those are series that I've started. They're sitting on my shelves in some way, shape, or form, waiting for me to pick them back up. So did any of these stand out to you? Do you read any of these that you think I need to make a bigger priority and to get back to sooner rather than later? There are definitely some standouts for me, just even sitting here talking about them. I have some standouts that I would like to get back to very soon. So I'm going to make some notes of those and maybe pull the next book I need to read and throw them in my room and maybe see if I can get to those sooner rather than later. That's definitely something I'd like to do so that they're a little bit more in the forefront of my mind. But yeah, let me know your thoughts down below and I will talk to you guys again soon. Hope you have a great day. Bye.